I met Kerry Tottingham, oh gosh, a few years ago now. We've worked together a couple of times. We've been in communities together. And when she told me she'd written a book, I had to get her onto the podcast. The book is Healing Centered Transformation, and it explains her methodology, which is healing centered design. The strapline of the book is Mend, Tend, and Change the Future. So you can see why I was hooked. And it includes brilliant frameworks such as moving from pain to power and understanding pain as chronic personal pain or societal pain, and understanding power not as power over, but power with collective power. There's some really juicy stuff in here and in the conversation to follow. She also, which is unusual for a business or self-help book, sprinkled poems all the way through it. And she shares one of them on the podcast, Grit, a Poem for Resilience, which is really worth a listen. So I hope you enjoy our conversation as much as I did, and I will stop talking so you can go listen. Harry, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. I'm so excited to have you here. It's been a long time coming, both in my brain and in our logistics of actually making it happen.
Lovely to be here.
Could you start by introducing yourself and telling folks a little bit about what you do and how you came to do what you do?
Sure. So I'm Kerry and I run a Brilliant Thing with my sisters. Brilliant Thing is a community interest company and we work on social justice projects and we offer coaching and consultancy support. But our kind of main focus is healing centered design. So we've developed a methodology that brings together trauma informed practice with systems thinking and creative coaching, which I can talk about all day and will talk more about. But that's an interesting question, how I came to it. So I'm one of those people that's done many, many jobs in the world. So I've worked in an egg mayonnaise factory and
Amazing.
I've worked in a Ann Summers factory. And
Amazing.
I've done loads of, not just factory jobs, but I've done loads of different jobs that have all been about kind of people and groups, and bits that I've been really interested in have been about the kind of dynamics and relationships between people, even in those kind of factory environments or hospitality. Um, but all I wanted to do when I was younger was to do art. And I was like, do art, do art, do art. Did it at GCSE, A level, university. And then I was like, oh, where's the job? So, so I wanted to be creative and I was interested in people. And I found out I was quite good at writing funding applications somewhere along the line.
Very
And I
handy in
think
the
that's
arts.
because, yeah, I think that's because I like telling a story of the future and
Mm.
kind of imagining what could be and then kind of working out how to get there. So I think it was always inevitable that I was going to start a company doing that or helping other people do that. Did my coach training along the way. Um, but yeah, community organizing, creativity, group dynamics, those are like common themes in the jobs that I've done up to this point.
It's interesting, isn't it, when you can look back and spot the
Yeah,
themes?
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And my sisters and I, so my mum was a counsellor. She was one of the first counsellors in the UK that was connected to the NHS. So she was like quite a pioneer in the sort of counselling world. And I think growing
Mm.
up, we've all ended up in work that's kind of human related. So I have a sister who um, her background's in HR and partnership management, and then the other sister is did lots of events management, but then also is trained as counsellor as well. And now we sort of bring all of those skills together to offer our programs and our workshops and our projects. So yeah, it feels like a nice coming together of all of
Mm.
us.
Amazing. I love that. What's it like working with your sisters? I love my sisters dearly, but I'm not sure I could work with them.
It's lovely. So at the moment, Tessa is on maternity leave, and I miss her so much.
Oh.
We have to be careful to separate out kind of sister stuff and work stuff.
Yeah.
My husband calls us the sisterhood, and so we've got like different WhatsApp groups for different things. But yeah, I think we all complement each other really well, and had an example of that recently, actually with Faye. So Tessa works in the business. Faye's a director at the moment. Although I think by the time this comes out, she will be working with us. Um, she actually handed her notice in today, which, as long as this doesn't come
Exciting.
out tomorrow, I think that. Um, but me and her did a car boots out in the summer, and I think one of our strengths as sisters is like we get on really well and we're quite fun together and we like
Mm,
talking to people and we like getting people to join in with us. And our car boot sale stall was the busiest because nobody else was talking to any of the customers and we were like giving
interesting.
them things to try on and telling them to buy a tagine and doing different things. And it was, yeah, it was really fun to do that together. So I think we've got some shared experience, obviously, and
Yeah.
it's really nice actually to work with people that you have like a real shorthand with.
Mm,
You sort of know what they're probably going to say or think. Um, I think that really helps, especially because we live at different ends of the country, so it's
right.
we're not together in person that
Mm.
much. But yeah, it works.
I love that. I know that you, like me, are a big believer in little moments of joy, even in amongst
Mm.
the hardest of times. Um, the strapline of this podcast is conversations about hope, but I always try to be clear that I don't mean kind of naive optimism. I'm talking about hope
Yeah.
that is forged in grief, in hardship, in despair.
Mhm.
Could you talk a little bit about that and the role that that sort of defiant hope is what I talk about
Yeah.
has played in your life and in the journey of a brilliant thing?
Yeah. So I think I've changed my opinion on the word hope in the
Mm,
last year or so. I I thought of hope as being quite passive.
mm,
Um, I've always been quite action orientated and independent and um, if it's not working, then let's make something that works, that kind
mm,
of attitude, which I think
yeah.
is quite an enterprising attitude. And it's probably helped me develop a lot in
Mm.
terms of our organization and things.
It's that difference between I can't and how can I, isn't it? That sort of when you hit
Absolutely.
a
Yeah.
roadblock, I think there is a personality type or something we all fall into at times where you
Hmm.
hit a roadblock and you just go, I can't. And
Yeah.
at another time in your life or another personality type, you might go, okay, that's not working. So what
Yeah.
might work? How can I? And that how can I think can
Totally.
be such a powerful
Yeah.
question, can't it?
Yeah. And I think a lot of that is conditioning, isn't it? So I was
Mm,
brought up in a how can I kind of
mm,
culture environment. And yeah, actually, maybe why my kind of ideas around hope have changed is because I think this year I have hit a I can't.
mm,
Um, we've had a series of difficult family events. My mum died after a really difficult illness where we were caring for her, and my husband's been diagnosed with a brain tumor, and we've had the like family fallout of that within our children and
mm,
um, a lot of change and uncertainty around work and the future. And I think, your resilience in times like this, where it feels like one thing after another,
yeah,
um, and living in that kind of that sort of freeze mode of like what's going to happen next,
yeah,
and vigilance and all of that, that can strip away your resilience and can strip away your how can I? And I think whilst the how can I has always or has continued to exist in my work because it involves people and community and momentum, and that doesn't stop. Um, I think personally, I've had to find something else in
that's
addition.
interesting.
Um, and someone told me like quite early on in all of this turmoil, that hope isn't an emotion, it's an everyday action.
Love that.
And I've really that there was some particularly difficult days that has really got me through where I've been like,
Mm,
right, I'm hopeful, so I'm gonna cook a nutritious meal.
yeah,
I'm gonna find hope in this walk. I'm gonna, the real basics.
yeah,
I'm gonna go to this exercise class and like just follow what the person tells me to do for an hour.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
absolutely got me through. So I think I guess my yeah hope can sometimes be in the very, very basic.
yeah.
Um, and in those, like you say, those moments of joy. And I was telling my son just earlier today, we last time we were at my mum's clearing her house, I went out in the morning and had a cup of tea in the garden and just recorded the garden um,
Oh.
just for 5 minutes. And it was the recording is so familiar to me, the
Mm.
particular birds, or there's some big trees near her. So, wood pigeons, and just that it's so familiar because I grew up in that house, and I feel like that's a really precious thing to have and to keep.
That's such a lovely
And I keep
idea.
putting it on my Instagram reels as the background noise and thinking, haha, nobody else knows that that's like,
That's
so
such
I
a
guess
lovely
that's
idea
a bit of
because those are
humor.
the things you almost don't notice, but you miss when
Mm,
they're gone. And every
exactly.
time you hear
Yeah.
that little sound, it's going to take you right back there.
Yeah, exactly. And it was inspired by there's a podcast called Invisibilia. They don't make it anymore, but it was so good. It's about the invisible forces that shape our world, I think was their strapline.
Hmm.
And somebody recorded her grandma's house. So she walked up the stairs and recorded the
Mm.
stairs and like the twist of the door and the set. And, you know, I think that audio, like sensory
Yeah.
stuff is really can be really powerful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. You tend to think about people's smells when they die, don't we? That you'll
Mm,
sort of sometimes hang
mm.
on to a piece of clothing or a scarf or something. But I
Yeah.
love the idea of capturing some of the sounds.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, what a lovely idea. And I love that hope isn't an emotion, it's an everyday action. I think that's so true. My husband and I
Mm,
sometimes talk about joy hunting. So we'll be like,
mm.
right, I'm going out, I'm going joy hunting. Like I'm having a bad day, everything's going wrong. I'm just going out to find some joy. And then, we'll have a
Yeah,
walk around the
lovely.
village or whatever. And I'll come back and my husband said to me yesterday, did you find any joy? And I was like, I met a Dalmatian, and he was like, that's pretty cool. And it is those little tiny things, I think, particularly when you're going through a really hard time. I
Mm,
remember at one point I was just really struggling to see the good in anything. Do you know when you just kind of have that
hmm.
almost shut down? And I was like, right, I
Yeah.
am just going to write down, I'm going to open a notes app in my phone and I'm just going to write down
Hmm.
anything that sparks the tiniest amount of joy. And it was,
Yeah.
an ice cold Diet Coke or, you know,
Yeah.
something made me laugh on the telly. Like it was the tiniest things, but this list
Yeah.
gradually got longer and longer. And then
That's
I think
nice.
I was like
Yeah.
training myself to notice the good again. Yeah,
Mm.
it can
And
be
sometimes you
tiny.
don't even have to believe in it. You can
Mm,
just be like, oh, everyone says that that's a good thing to do, so I'm just going to do it.
yes, yeah,
I'm just going to do the basics. I'm just going to,
shower.
drink the Coke or do whatever the thing is. And then
Yeah.
you're like, oh, yeah, it was good.
Yeah, this bit I saw on Instagram recently. So, do you know there's this trend at the moment where people ask for completely unhinged recommendations?
Yeah.
And someone was asking for unhinged recommendations to make yourself feel better when you're in a real funk. And this woman said that she climbs into the shower with a whole mango and sits on the shower floor and eats a whole mango. And I was just like, oh my God, I love this. Because it means you can just get all drippy and
Hilarious.
sticky and messy because you're
Yeah.
in the shower. And just like the sensory experience of that, right? The strong taste of
Yeah.
the mango and the water. I was just
Oh, it's
like,
visceral, isn't it?
right, it's so visceral, almost like there's something quite animalistic about it.
Yeah, it feels like erotic.
Yes, it really does. It really does in a kind of really like self way.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. So
Oh.
yeah, and I think you're absolutely right. I have a little diagram that I share from time to time, which is like a concentric circle of defiant hope and aligned action. Because I think
Mm.
sometimes having the hope enables you to take the action, but as you say, sometimes
Yeah,
it's doing the action that helps you to find the hope. And I think it's
yeah,
it's trying to
yeah,
stay in that virtuous circle, isn't it? As much as you
yeah.
can.
And actually, because we do a lot of group work, so we do a lot of organizational development mainly with charities, public sector teams,
Hmm.
and sometimes co-production projects. So we're bringing together those different sectors and things. And actually finding that kind of um, shared point that we're all going to work towards can
Mm.
be really tough.
Hmm.
Um, when people have got their kind of organizational blinkers on. And so tapping into the kind of sensory stuff, we do a lot of creativity and making things and stuff like junk modeling and mapping out experiences using objects and
Mm.
fun stuff. But it kind of taps into something different and people are able to find that kind of common ground. And yeah, I guess find that hope
Mm,
that they can do something together to make a difference.
yeah.
And often, particularly if we're doing something around like developing a new funding mechanism or, trying to solve a particular social justice problem,
Yeah.
hope is, it's not much of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and maybe the sensory stuff and the action helps build it there too.
Yeah, I think it can really help to overcome assumptions as well. I don't remember which design consultancy it was. I'll look it up and pop it in the notes. But
Mm,
somebody was given the brief to create a phone for older people. So they
okay.
assumed they would be designing a dumb phone, like something that just enabled them to
Okay.
phone their
Yeah.
grandkids. So they gave them bananas and a bunch of stickers and asked them to design
Mhm.
their perfect phone, and they all designed basically a smartphone with features
Mm,
they didn't know existed but did already exist. So they were like, I'd love to be able to
okay.
see my grandchildren when I was talking to them. And this was years ago before
Yeah, yeah.
FaceTime with and the designers were going, yeah, I mean you can already do that with FaceTime.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
actually what they ended up designing was an instruction manual. Like, this is how to use the
Mm,
phone you've already got. This is all the cool stuff it
yeah, yeah.
does. And it was really interesting that they thought the problem was the phone, but the problem was
Yeah,
actually
yeah.
understanding how to use the phone. And I think because they started with design your perfect phone, here's a banana and some stickers,
Mm,
they actually
yeah,
ended up
started with an
completely
assumption.
challenging that. Yeah, they ended up kind of completely challenging the brief and realizing they needed to create something completely different from what
Mm,
they thought they needed to. I'll dig out the case study and pop it
yeah,
in the notes
that's
because
interesting.
I think it's so interesting how sometimes getting into our senses, as you say, and kind of making
Mm,
something three-dimensional rather than being very cerebral and, answering a bunch of
yeah,
questions enables us to tap into new
yeah,
insights. But I'm
yeah.
conscious I'm going off on a bit of a tangent. And you mentioned your framework, and you've also written a beautiful book. Folks who are watching on YouTube will be able to see this. People who are listening on the podcast won't. But it's called Healing Centered Transformation. Tell us a little bit about the book and the methodology.
Yeah, so healing centered design is the methodology, and the sort of central transition that we're trying to journey along with this design work is pain to power.
I love
So
that.
when I'm talking about pain, I'm talking about maybe personal pain. I
Hmm.
have some chronic health conditions, um, endometriosis, and a bladder condition. And we work with lots of people who are in pain for some reason, physically
Mm,
or emotionally. But it's also societal pain, so injustice, inequality. And then the power that we want to move people to is very much that I can end of things.
mm,
So it's about empowerment, it's about collective power, it's about the things that we can do together that to create better stuff in the world, to create more brilliant things. So that's the central transition of this
mm.
methodology.
And I
And
love
then
that because I also suffer from chronic pain, and I think
yeah,
power feels like the absolute opposite of that. It feels so far away when you're really struggling with a long-term health
yeah,
condition. And so I love the language around that, from pain to
hmm,
power. And then, as you say, framing that as both personal and collective, I think is a
sure,
really
yeah.
interesting.
And it's those two words are so emotive, pain and power. We do whole
Mm,
workshops on pain and power because nobody wants to admit they're in pain. Nobody
mm,
wants, or a lot of people that we work with don't want to associate themselves with power because
mm,
power has become a little bit demonized in the way that money has. It as being controlling power over, done to, persecutor power.
mm,
And actually power is we need agency, we need power, we need control, we need all of these things are it's about how you use them and what you do with them.
mhm,
So there's a lot of kind of unpicking of conditioning that has to happen about around both of those words, pain and power.
mm,
Um, and then we have some principles. So we have 5 principles which are based on. We did a piece of co-production work with over 60 organisations in Bolton,
mm,
and we looked at trauma-informed practice.
mhm,
So trauma-informed practice is a methodology that's used quite a lot within the NHS, and we looked at the things that were really important for people's lives and organizations and relationships to create safe and supportive spaces
Mm.
um, where people could flourish, could do their best work. And we came up with these principles. So I'll run through them. The first is rhythm and ritual,
Mm.
which is about creating safety, regularity, regulation in your body.
Yeah.
Um, the next is filter, which is about decision making and choice and prioritizing.
Yeah.
The next is collide and align, which your designer listeners will love. So collide and align is all about, creating new things out of multiple parts and blending difference. And it's also about kind of conflict and tension,
Mm.
and innovation. And then we've got transition, which you can find wisdom in transition because it's about pausing and reflecting,
Mm.
um, to help you move from kind of one place to another. And then the final one is contribute and benefit. And we all do too much contributing and not enough benefiting.
Say
And so
more.
we teach people different ways to use these principles to design stuff. And that stuff, those things might be a project or an organization or a team, or they might be your own work life. And we have a membership called the Brilliant Club, which we're refocusing on people who have chronic health conditions and work in communities. Um, and so the book Healing Centered Transformation is me applying that framework to my life and the projects that I'm working on to illustrate it's the benefits of working in this way.
Mhm.
So it's me, dealing with trying to create a meaningful work life despite or because of the health conditions and constraints that I have.
Mm.
Um, and it's also community projects and leaders and different, there's case studies in there from different people who are using an aspect of this kind of healing centered trauma informed systems thinking type of approach to create things that are really positive and generative, but also that are going to change things. Um, I think that you hear quite a lot that things have to change and not enough about how. So this is a bit of a how. Of
Yeah, I had an
course, it's got some
interesting.
nice poems in there and stuff.
It has, and we're going to come to the poems because I love that there's poems in there. But yeah, it was interesting in the podcast interview I did with Sass Petherick a couple of episodes ago.
Oh yeah.
They were talking about how often their clients come to them with a sense of not this, and her
Hmm.
job is to get them to that. And this idea
Yeah.
that not this is a brilliant starting point, but it's not enough. We need to get to,
Yeah.
as you say, we something's got to change. We're not happy with what's going on in society at the moment. Okay, cool, but what do we want instead, and how do we get there? That's kind of
Yeah.
the next
Yeah.
step, isn't it?
And I think we're constantly looking for ways to do this in public. So a small example is that when we take August off, we delete all our emails. We turn our emails off in essence during August. So if you email us in August, we'll never read that email. But we have a really good like out of office and we tell people, email back at this time or whatever. And it's just a way to stop it feeling overwhelming when we come
Mm.
back to work. But people are shocked and appalled sometimes when they hear this.
I love it.
And yet,
It's like the out of office that
most,
says, I'm not here, therefore your email has been deleted. It's just
yeah,
like,
exactly.
but yeah, email me back
Exactly.
on this date because
Yeah,
so often that thing has disappeared while you've been away. And then you spend
yeah,
time chasing up
totally.
and they're like, oh no, don't worry, we sorted it. And it's like,
Mm,
cool, that was a waste of half an hour of my life. And God knows how much
100%.
carbon storing all those unnecessary emails.
Yeah, exactly. And what we love now is after doing this for 3 years, when we send an email, we quite often get an email back from somebody saying, I've deleted your email.
The ripple
And
effect.
so there's the ripple. And then somebody also said that they have changed how they manage their whole team's leave. So their whole team if somebody's on leave, they're not allowed to email them. They have to put it into a sort of back to work document,
Mm,
if it's that important, and often it's not.
yeah.
And then on that person's first day back, they have a document rather than 20 million
Yeah,
emails.
yeah. They just
So
get
it's
a
lovely to
debrief.
see that changing a whole like team.
Nice.
And actually this year we've so then I guess the evolution of this is it possible not to do meetings anymore?
Mm,
And that's so we found more and more with our online work, particularly, people just don't have the bandwidth to sit for a whole meeting.
yeah.
And a lot of it is unimportant or not right for them. So
And an hour long by default. Like, no, how is it
yeah,
that every meeting is exactly an hour? It's so
exactly.
strange.
How is that possible? So this time we've got a lot of work in Wigan at the moment, a lot of work in Bolton and in Manchester. So we're doing 3 co-working days where
Mm,
people can just come along and have a chat. Um, instead of booking in like a catch-up meeting,
yeah, nice.
and seeing how that works. So we want to be finding these like solutions and sharing them as we're doing them so that
Yeah.
more people think, oh, well, maybe I could do that.
Yeah.
That's
Sort of having office
kind of the whole
hours
point
rather
of our
than
work. Yeah.
lots of meetings. I love that.
Mm,
And it's so beautiful to see. And this is not the best example because I'm not currently
mm,
doing it. But for a long time, I worked a 4-day week, and I can remember
mm,
having a conversation with the founder of a company who was just like, "How does this work? How do you get out?" Had so many
mm.
questions, and I saw on the bottom of her email. On her email signature, it says, "Our company is a 4-day week company. We don't,"
Nice.
and I was
Nice.
just like, she did it. Sadly, I'm currently
Yeah.
not doing it. So I need to get the ripple effect back to me.
Well, this
Um,
is why rhythm and ritual.
okay,
This
so
is principle
talk to
101.
me about rhythm and ritual.
Yeah, so rhythm and ritual is all of these principles are about creating something. So when
Hmm.
you're in chaos or overly stressed or you've got too much to do, then the thing that you need more of is rhythm and ritual. So rhythm being the regular things that you do, the patterns, the routines, and ritual being the beginning and the ends of things. So the marking of the passage of time, um the celebration points, the kind of renewal points, that kind of secular
Hmm.
life cycle kind of stuff. Um, but we're not saying this is the only thing you need because we've also got collide and align in there. So
Hmm.
when things are feeling stuck or boring or you just don't have the motivation, well then some collide and align is what you need.
Yeah.
And this sort of language we run a facilitators course and like I say we have the Brilliant Club and people adopt this language. It's
Hmm.
We have lots of exercises, kind of creative, reflective practice exercises, and workshops that we run with individuals and groups, which are about how to put some of these practices into your life. And then once you've got a range of them that work for you, you, you can identify what you need and then
Hmm.
meet your own needs.
Yeah, which is
And
half the
that's a
problem
really,
sometimes, isn't it? And I
yeah,
think
yeah,
particularly if you've got ADHD or autism or both,
hmm
and I definitely have ADHD. I suspect I also have autism because sometimes I crave ritual and stability
hmm
and order like nothing else. And then within 3 weeks, I'm bored out of my tiny little mind and I
yeah,
throw a grenade into it and create utter chaos. And then I'm completely dysregulated, don't know whether I'm coming or going. And that balance between the two, I
yeah,
think, particularly for neurodivergent folks, is so
yeah,
hard to find. That sort of,
yeah,
as you say, the rituals and the rhythms that kind of ground you and keep you feeling emotionally regulated, but then the kind of dopamine of the
hmm
new things and the kind of
yeah,
how do we make something exciting so that it doesn't all. I think
yeah.
particularly with ADHD things start feeling monotonous so quickly.
hmm
So yeah, having
hmm
those two tools and helping people to understand which one it is they need a bit more of
Yeah.
sounds
Yeah.
incredibly valuable.
Exactly. And at the top of it is recognizing that you do need both and you can
Yeah,
have both and it's
yeah,
okay to have both. A
yeah.
lot of the like rhetoric that we hear online particularly is, about like a morning routine or something.
Mm,
Like set your morning routine, choose it, and then do it for life.
yeah.
And there is an element of when you set a routine, you make a choice and a decision, and then you don't have to keep thinking about that. So you can let
Hmm.
that go. But we all need variety. We all
Mm.
need, these different ways of being, and our lives change. Nothing stays
Yeah.
static.
Yeah.
So if we, if it's fine, if, we just
Yeah.
accept that that's fine.
And I think
That's
taking some
half
of
the
the
battle.
shame away from that as well, because I think I
Mm,
spent so long getting so cross with myself because I'd find a system that worked and it would stop working.
yeah.
And I would just be like, oh, when am I going to find, quote unquote, the perfect system that
Hmm.
actually works? Or when am I going to force myself into a system? And eventually
Yeah.
I realized that that's just who I am. I have to change everything up every so often. And
Yeah.
letting go
Right.
of the shame of that
Yeah.
allows me to find the solutions much more quickly rather than beating myself
Totally.
up for 3 weeks and still trying to force myself into a
Yeah.
routine that's
Yeah.
no longer working. It's like, cool, okay, that one's not working, need a new one.
Yeah.
Let's go.
But you might recognize that you still need regulation. So
Mm,
maybe this structured routine isn't working anymore, but you still need
yeah,
regulation. So how could you do some collide and aligning, but in a way that's calm, or in a way that gives you a bit of that kind of
yeah,
feeling of regulation?
yeah.
And so much of this is like, what are the needs, and what are the needs underneath the needs?
Uh-huh. Yeah, say more
And
about
that's where
that.
the transition one comes in
Yeah.
so well, because that's about kind of, if you imagine moving from one place to another physically, there's a journey part. There's a
Hmm.
part where you're moving through, you're not instantly from one place to another place. And again, our culture is so instantaneous that we sort of forget that there's in-betweens.
Mm,
And there's a lot of wisdom in the in-betweens, particularly around yourself and your like inner world.
mm,
Um, and yeah, I mean, this is the one that I find probably the most useful
mm,
and the hardest. Because I want to move quick, and I'm a fast person, I want to do lots of things, and I've got big ambitions, and but actually the kind of pausing and slowing down is really helpful. And for the last 3 years, we we have a WhatsApp group with the Brilliant Club, and every week we post. I was going to say every Monday. The aim is every Monday. Every week we post a reflective prompt, and it's
mm,
based on each month we do one of the principles. And so they're like today I did one which was about this month is contribute and benefit month for the Brilliant Club. And we so if we're gonna I sort of believe that if you want something in your life, you have to create a space for it. You have to welcome it
mhm.
in. So um if you want calmness in your life, then having a bit of a declutter can help you kind
Yeah,
of welcome in that calmness.
yeah,
So the prompt this week was to find a welcoming place or a welcoming view or object, and take a photo of it and just kind of reflect on why that feels welcoming to you.
mm,
And actually the insights that you get from everybody are so beautiful, and sometimes people, there's no pressure to contribute, but mainly people do, um, can really like shift your perspective and help you like mull over something for a whole week, which
mm.
helps me with my like transition reflection. Because it can be hard to say like, I'm going to sit down for an hour and reflect
Yeah.
if you've got something kind of
Yeah.
in the
And I think
background
actually you
that's
get
been
more
helpful.
interesting thoughts sometimes when you're out walking the
Mm.
dog or blow drying your
Yeah, of
hair
course
or
you do.
what,
Mm-hmm.
again, particularly for neurodivergent folks, our brains work better when we're
Yep.
in motion, when we're moving through
Mm-hmm.
landscape. So,
Mm.
train journeys actually I find really
Yeah.
helpful.
Yeah.
But it's interesting that point about kind of a transition. I think we're so desperate to get rid of the old and start on the new,
Yeah.
that bit in between. I am emerging from a period of transition, and I said to
Mm.
somebody recently, I was like, I just feel like the caterpillar in the goo. And she was like, Katie, the caterpillar doesn't sit in goo, the caterpillar
Yeah.
becomes
Is the
goo.
goo.
Like, you're not a caterpillar, you are goo. And I was like, oh, that's why it's so hard. And it's that we forget that, don't we? We think, oh, I've just got to sit in this goo for a bit and then I can go. And it's like, no, no,
Yeah.
you've got to completely metaphorically disintegrate everything that
Yeah.
was, allow time for it to kind of compost and reform, and then you
Mhm.
can begin. And yeah, I think we can be very impatient, but as you say,
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
wisdom in the goo.
There is wisdom in the goo. And my husband's got such a good like handle on this. So he's having chemotherapy at the moment and he's having treatment and he's had to leave work.
Mm,
And he's a Reiki master and he's a chef and he used to work in kind of corporate chef world. And that lifestyle is not sustainable for him
yeah.
anymore. And so he's setting up a business called the Reiki Baker, and it's about teaching sourdough masterclasses.
Mm.
Um, and so I don't know if you've ever made sourdough, but it takes
I've tried.
ages. It takes all day. And the method that he uses it's a really kind of low impact method. There's no like kneading for hours. It's kind of a 10-minute knead and then or not even a 10-minute knead, like a 2-minute knead and then leave it for a period of time and then come back to it. So you're kind of cultivating and nurturing this thing over the course of
Mm,
maybe 6 hours. And so the master classes, what do you do in all of those kind of pockets of time? Or now you've created pockets of time, what could you do? So
mm.
he's going to be doing kind of well-being walks and conversation-based
Oh, I
kind
love
of
that.
activities and just making it a real sort of practice in slowing down
Yeah,
and having these pockets of well-being, these pockets of time in between something quite productive.
yeah,
And then at the end of the day, having this thing that you can take away to go and, break bread with your friends, kind of,
yeah,
um, yeah, that kind of contribute and benefit, I guess, at the end, the kind
yeah.
of giving and receiving part. And I think, sometimes it does take these big life shifts to think, actually, how do I want to work? How do I want
Mm,
to live? And it was definitely the same for me with, I mean, my company, A Brilliant Thing, it was created at 2 o'clock in the morning in the bath because I was in pain and having nights and nights of this like excruciating pain.
mm.
And it was almost dissociation, like I had to go somewhere else in my brain. And I
Yeah.
had to go and I went somewhere creative and I wanted to go somewhere that would get me out of where I was then.
Mm,
Um, I had a really stressful job and, creating my own, designing that work life and realizing that, you can design the things that you need.
mm,
Um, I guess that's what it's all about.
mm. It's just having those tools and those frameworks, isn't it?
Yeah.
And talking about frames, there's a phrase you shared with me when we first worked together that stayed with me ever since, which is a frame to dance within. And I
Yeah.
would love you to talk a little bit more about that phrase because I have repeated it to so many people because I just think
It
it's the
has
most,
legs.
it really does. And I'm probably applying it
Yeah.
in all sorts of places that you never intended it to be applied, but I just thought
Oh,
it was
that's
a
absolutely
really
fine, Katie. I mean,
beautiful
ideas
concept.
ideas flow, don't they? Like you there's always more ideas. You just keep coming up with them. So, all of our work, we want people to take the language and take the frameworks and apply it and use it. So yeah, that's lovely. So a frame to dance within is well, the basic concept is if you imagine a picture frame, the picture frame is solid, but you can put whatever you want in the middle.
Hmm.
So you can dance within this kind of frame, and it's really helpful concept because if somebody gives you a blank page and tells you to write a novel,
Mm,
then it's going to be much harder to start than if someone says, "Can you write a novel for this type of people that's set in this timescape that's got these characters, and you've got this amount of time to do it."
yeah.
So having parameters, creative constraints, things that don't shift, things that are solid, things that you can rely on and trust in, allows you to be more creative.
Yeah.
And it's particularly helpful if you're doing any collaborative work or any work with groups where you need to get people on the same page.
Mm,
Because what you can do is co-create the frame. So
hmm.
you can work out how much, I mean, often we do like time, money, resources,
Hmm.
ideas, or energy or something. So
Yeah.
the parameters can be labeled in different ways, but they're things that probably aren't going to change. And people push against them. They're like, well, maybe we could get more funding in, maybe we could, double the time scale. And it's a good practice to say, yeah, and that's a different frame. So
Mm.
let's do this frame first. Let's see
Yeah.
what we can dance within here, and then let's push those boundaries.
Mm.
And often the most sort of innovative ideas come about when there's a boundary.
Yeah.
Um, so we have to be careful not to live in kind of scarcity and think, oh, we can't do that because we haven't got time. We can't do that because we haven't got money. Um, but if we're really clear and transparent about what those constraints are,
Mm.
and then open up the space for that creative freedom and play and sensory stuff and ideas and all of that co-creation, then we can create something that we can probably do on time within budget in
Yeah.
meeting the needs that we're setting out to do, um in a way that something like a Gantt chart or a I don't know, any other sort of project management tool just doesn't really hit the mark.
Mm.
And another one that I love to use alongside this is called daisy chain planning.
Right.
This is going to be difficult to describe on a podcast. Normally, right. So if you draw a line that kind of loops and how am I going to explain this?
I'm assuming
If
it
you
looks
do
like a
it like
daisy chain, right?
yeah. So you do a kind of a line that's a sort of scribble that's got containers within it.
Uh-huh.
Oh my God,
So it's like a
we're going to have to
continuous
draw a
line, but
picture
with loops.
with
We can
loops.
put a
Yeah.
picture in the show notes.
So the first loop is your activity and your action, and you can really go to town in like planning and designing and like what's going to happen in that first loop.
Hmm.
But you don't know what's going to happen in the second loop because you've got to do the first loop first. There's going to be a second loop and a third loop and probably a fourth loop, and you can put a timeline on this as well if you
Hmm.
want. Um, and you could put in some like milestones. So you could say we're going to have planning meetings before and after and reflection meetings after every loop. But you don't plan what you're going to do. The activity stays unknown.
Okay.
And so you really plan the first one. And then once you've planned that first one, you have some reflection time to plan the next one. And this really helps people feel safe, particularly people like funders, commissioners, anybody that clients, even anybody that's tasking you with a project. Because if you say, oh, we're going to do this tomorrow, but we don't know what we're going to do next week, that can feel very scary and risky. Whereas if you say, we're going to do this tomorrow, and at the beginning of next week, we're going to have a planning meeting based on our learning from this week. And at the end of next week, we're going to have a reflection session to consolidate our, insight,
Yeah.
and then we're going to do the same again. That sounds and feels a lot
Mm.
safer
Yeah.
and a lot more uh, like productive, and like that it's got momentum and it's moving in a direction. So these two, frame to dance with them and daisy chain planning, are really good for co-production projects.
Mm.
So projects where you've got multiple partners, but even just for yourself,
Mm.
sometimes you need that structure, like you say, but you still want a bit of that excitement and freedom.
Yeah. Yeah. And as I said, I think particularly for us neurodivergent folks, it's a constant battle between the freedom and the novelty and the kind of
Yeah.
structure and the kind of need to be making progress. I was looking this morning back at a plan I made that had like my goals for the year and Q1, Q
Hmm.
just like those aren't even my goals anymore. But at
Yeah.
least there was some logic of I'm not doing this yet because that's over there. I'm
Hmm.
focusing on this. And then, yeah, I think that reflect and replan stage is so important, isn't it? Because it's like
Yeah.
having done this, now what do I want to do next?
Hmm.
Are these goals still relevant? So
Yeah.
having that capacity to explore and that
Yeah.
flexibility, I think, is really powerful. Um, Tell us a little bit about neuroplasticity. That is a word that has come up in our conversations before. What is
Mm.
it for folks who don't know, and how does it support the work that you do?
Yeah. So neuroplasticity is the idea that we can create new kind of neural pathways. So just because we've done something in one way forever doesn't mean that we have to do it in that way forever.
Hmm.
Um, so a coach that I work with called Beth Creedon, she calls this the sheep tracks. So if you imagine a mountain and the sheep tracks that the sheep create, sometimes you have to create new sheep tracks.
Uh-huh.
And another I don't know, I'm sure you've heard of desire paths. So
Mm,
sometimes, particularly, I think there was a Japanese park project where
mm,
they built some parks and then they didn't put paths in and they let people walk across and create the paths and then they put the paths in.
yeah.
That's another kind of useful metaphor for this kind of neuroplasticity idea. Um, so like I said, some of our work is about deconditioning people, so kind of
Mm,
rethinking, reconditioning people maybe. Um, and often the first step to people thinking that they can do something differently is to know that it's possible to change your habits or
mm,
change your experience.
mm,
Um, a lot of the world wants us to think that's not the case. A lot of technology wants us to think that's not the case. There's power in knowing that you can change things.
mm,
Um, and, you know, proving it to yourself. So if you manage to embed a simple habit, or if you manage to change your mind, um, or if you learn something new and grow, if that's an experience that you've ever experienced, then your new neural waves can be
mm,
paths can be forged. Um, Again, it's interesting with Lawrence, my husband, with his brain tumor, because where the brain tumor is, it's in the center of your emotions, the place, the
right.
physical place that it is. So when he's had kind of radiotherapy, it's like concentrated on those kind of neural emotional pathways, and so
Mm,
he's kind of firsthand had this like visceral experience of things feeling different.
mm,
And that's been really interesting to see, and to see him kind of move through and change, and come to terms with kind of how things feel now.
mm,
Um, I think a lot of pain is holding on to how things were, or trying to get back to, or trying to mold into something, when
mm,
actually maybe it's about creating those new steps and those that new um experience of life.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot in Buddhist teachings about that sort of thing, isn't there? The idea of
Mm,
attachment, and
yeah.
a lot of pain is
Acceptance
caused
and
by our expectations and things not meeting our
yeah.
expectations. And if we let go of the expectations, you also let go
Oh
of the
God,
pain.
yeah.
Yeah.
I remember when I was like probably early 20s and having ridiculous relationships, and I remember Googling once, is it okay to have expectations? And I think those like that, as I mean, as a woman, as somebody who has needs, I mean, we all
Yeah.
have needs, don't we? It's it, I've got a crunchy relationship with expectations. I think we probably all do.
Yeah.
And it's another one like power. If you say I want power,
Mm,
people will have a reaction to
mm.
that. And yeah, I think asserting ourselves in a way that's kind, but not because we're trying to be palatable.
Yes.
um,
Yeah.
yeah, all of that is an ongoing
Yeah.
struggle, isn't it?
And it's so interesting, I think, that idea about, just because things have always been a certain way. I had a conversation with a friend who's always wanted to live in Brighton. And I was like, so
Okay.
why don't you just move to Brighton? And she was like, well, people can't just relocate, Katie. And I was like, yeah, they can. People do that all the
Hmm.
time. But she
Yeah.
had in her head that it was impossible
Hmm.
because she had a job and had kids in school and, had all the things
Yeah.
that make it difficult, but
Yeah.
not impossible. And I think it's
Yeah.
just that
Yeah.
shift, isn't it? And as you say, like those frames that we're dancing in, sometimes you have to
Yeah.
say,
Yeah.
actually, these are, I decided these, so I can change
Hmm.
these.
Yeah. What's this wall made of?
Right,
Is
right.
it
What's
made of
this?
brick or is it made of paper?
Yes, that's such a good question. What's this wall made of? Um, and even if it's made of brick,
Yeah.
yeah, I think it's so interesting the amount of times that people's assumptions become fact, or how it has always been done becomes how it
Yeah.
must always be done. And I think there
Yeah.
is great freedom in being able to to just ask those questions. What's this wall made of?
Mm,
How hard would
yeah.
it be to pull it down?
Yeah. And what does moving to Brighton represent as well?
Yes.
What's
What's
the
the real
what's the
need?
need under the need? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. How else could we solve it? Yeah,
Yeah.
I always think that when I'm watching location, location, location.
Yes.
And people are like, I need a three-bedroom house. And they're like, why? And it's like, because I need an office. And it's like, well, that could be a
Yeah.
two-bedroom house because you could put an office at the end of the garden. So like it's not three bedrooms, that's two bedrooms and an office. Carry
Yeah.
on. And then it's like, well,
Yeah.
I need two bathrooms or like whatever it is. And often, yeah, it's the need under the need, isn't it? That
Yeah.
is,
Yeah.
yeah.
Totally. I mean, I made this classic mistake last year. We bought a house. We have four children between us, so we bought a house that could accommodate them all.
Mm,
And almost as soon as we moved into the house, they sort of reached the age where they were wanting to not be in the house. And, because we wanted a room for all of them, I don't have an office. So now
right.
I'm building, well, next summer I'll be building a shed in the garden. I'm like, oh, just spent all this money on a house that
Yeah.
no one wants to be in anymore, and I'm going to go and sit in the shed in the garden.
Yeah, it's so interesting, isn't it? It's like when people
Things
talk about their
change.
forever house, and it's like there's no
Yeah,
such thing. Like
yeah,
your needs are going to change
exactly.
so many times over your lifetime.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just accepting that, I guess.
Mm,
So you mentioned the poetry,
mhm.
and I was going to say I'm a poet. I'm going to try
You are a
start
poet,
trying to
so.
say that sentence. I did a Cornish language residency recently, and because it's
Oh,
quite complex,
lovely.
it's a language I
Mm,
don't really speak yet. I introduced myself as a poet for the first time because it was simpler to say in Cornish than to kind of all the
yeah.
caveats I normally say in English. But as a poet, I
Mhm,
love the fact that this is kind of a non-fiction kind
mhm.
of which shelf does it sit on in the bookshop?
Oh God, I don't know.
Business book, self-help book, kind of. It's not
Yeah,
where you would
exactly. That
usually
was the hard
expect to
part.
find poetry.
Hmm.
So talk to me a little bit about why you decided to include the poetry, and then I'd love you to read one for us if you'd be
I
happy
will
to.
do. I will do. Yeah, so the poetry came quite late in this. So the way that I wrote the book was I was quite structured about writing it, and I wrote it in sort of I used to write a lot of blog posts,
Mhm.
so I sort of wrote it in blog posts and then spent time um kind of sculpting it in a similar way to you having a resistance to I am a poet. I make art all the time. I am creative, but I find it hard to say I'm an artist.
Yeah.
But that part of that like editing part of writing the book really felt like sculpture to me because it felt
Mm.
like shaping the whole. Um,
Yeah.
and I think just the process of doing it, I had this kind of opening up to the art of it.
Mm.
And even though it's a non-fiction book, there's a lot of experiences
Mhm.
held in there. Um, and so I'd kind of written the book or written the bones of it and was going through this kind of sculpting process. And there was more that I wanted to say, but I didn't want to be saying any more in like facts, or I felt like I could keep repeating myself
Mm.
if I wrote more. But I did want, but there was something else that needed to be expressed, I guess
Mhm.
is the best way of putting it. And I'd sort of been writing some like as part of my own reflective practice, writing some poems. And sometimes poetry in the past I've used as a way to express myself, but also keep myself safe because you can use the sort of the form of language
Mm.
to conjure up an essence of an emotion or an experience without saying this happened, then this happened, and
Yeah.
so I guess that was the kind of place that I was in. And then I had a meeting, a work thing, which was quite difficult. And it was very connected to something in the book. Um, and I was struggling emotionally to kind of process that meeting. Um, and so I wrote a poem, and then I was like, well, maybe I could just like maybe that's what I'm trying to say. I
Mm.
thought, well, maybe I can try with some of the other chapters, and it was actually really um kind of easy to write the poems. They once I'd got down the kind of the facts and the information and the what I wanted to say, the
Yeah.
poems are about the feeling of what I'm saying.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, so I really enjoyed that kind of process, and I do write poetry as a way to process stuff.
Mm.
Um, and I wrote a poem on the not the night that my mum died, but a few nights later, and that it was so cathartic.
Mm.
So I think it's powerful, even if it's just powerful for me.
Yeah.
But I hope that the kind of the essence of the poem does come across when people read it.
Yeah. I think it's so interesting what you were saying about how sometimes writing a poem can help you to express something while keeping you safe. Because
Hmm.
I think I was talking to somebody recently about how to ask for feedback on your work and understanding that feedback is just where your story meets their story, which I
Oh
thought was such a
yeah.
lovely way to phrase it. And I think what's beautiful about poetry is the story is kind of the unsaid thing
Hmm.
between your poem and their experience.
Hmm.
You don't, I think when you lay something out, sometimes it will miss their story because it's not the same. Whereas in a poem, you're implying a lot, aren't you? There's a lot of meaning that
Yeah.
sits beyond the words. And that means that meaning can sit beyond their experience as well. And it can kind of
Yeah, lovely.
float between the two of you,
Mm,
um, which I think is, yeah, one of the really powerful things about poems, actually. I think they can often
yeah.
reach something that is kind of collectively held but not really articulated by any of
Mm.
us. So
That's
I would,
really I was before I read the poem, let me just tell you that I was just talking to somebody today called Claire, who she runs an organization called Fallen Angels, and it's a
mhm.
dance theatre company that works with people in addiction recovery.
Oh wow.
And she was saying that one of the most powerful ways that they engage with new people is through their performances.
Mm,
But their performances are often kind of music, dance, there's not a lot of narrative. And so they're quite sensory experiences. They use light and things like that.
mm,
Um, and she said they part of the reason they do it in that way is to create a space for people to layer in their own story
mm.
and feel that connection to the piece of performance.
Yeah,
Um, so maybe poetry in itself is about creating space for those two, yeah,
yeah,
those two stories to me. I love that.
yeah. Awesome. Right. No pressure to create that
Yeah,
space
I
now.
know. What a builder.
But I would love you to read. Could you read Grit, a poem for resilience?
Yes, I can. So I'll tell you a tiny bit of context.
Thank you.
So this poem is about feeling like you're not enough. This is about feeling like your pain is bad and you have to hide it.
Hmm.
Um, and it's about recognizing an inner knowing. So, Grit, a poem for resilience. When you say my grit is not enough, or the pearl is too shiny, ignoring the tender bed, the crackety, fluted shell splits, blades shucked open, a pool of water within. A pearl moon reflected, a dark ocean of night. Inwards, twilight settles. You know, moon, with steady gaze. You see, you stay, in dark water gleaming. When you say my grit is not enough, the shell is too shallow, carved grooves worn on the inside. The pearl should not gleam. The water should not swell. The night should stay black. I look up at pearl moon poised, and I know.
So you definitely delivered on the preamble. That was
Yeah.
beautiful. Thank you. Um, yeah, last question, sadly, because I feel like we could keep talking all
Mm.
day. But I think grit and resilience are a big part of what I call defiant hope, and
Yeah.
that sense of holding on to the pearls and the moon in amongst the shards. So some version of this is always my last question, but I'd like to ask you what you're hopeful about and how you hold on to that hope when things feel really tough.
I'm hopeful. In fact, I know that we all, no, I'll make this about me. I know that I have everything that I need within me and the capacity to grow whatever I need next.
Mm,
And I hope that I continue to trust in that and to create spaces for myself and for other people to be able to express what they know, nurture and cultivate what they need, and to take that hopeful action.
I love that. And I'm going to ask you a little follow-up question, if I may.
Yeah,
Uh, because there's one bit of that I personally struggle with, and that's that
yeah.
trust, that self-trust. How do you develop that and hone that?
So the words cultivate and nurture are words that I come back to again and again.
Mm,
Um, and I think within healing centered design, one of the first exercises we do is called mend and tend.
mm,
So, what do we need to mend and what do we need to tend to? And the mend stuff is often societal conditioning, it's often systemic oppression, it's often, these kind of, the fact that there's not enough support for people, or, the mend stuff, if you can create a safe space for people to speak honestly, comes out quite easily.
mm,
But the tend stuff, the stuff that we need to cultivate and nurture, the like inner strengths often take a little bit more to get to those things. Um, and I think the you already have it. I think that's the biggest thing. You already have those strengths, and what if you could use those to tackle the problem? So we try and frame things like that. So, you mentioned that you crave structure and you like innovation and difference and different things. Well, what if you use the strength of being able to hold those two things at the same time to do whatever it is, the challenge that you want to do? And
mm,
I guess finding small ways to practice how you can use what you've already got to do
mm.
what you want, rather than think, I'll wait until I've got so and so, or I need to develop this.
Yeah.
I mean, even we kind of sit in the personal development world and don't really believe in personal development because I guess it's personal access and personal expression and personal like using of the tools that we have available to us that feels more
Yes.
real.
Yeah. And it
Yeah.
reminds me a little bit about what you were saying about hope and
Mhm.
action, in that you learn to trust yourself by trusting yourself. By
Yeah,
saying what,
yeah.
rather than I need to develop this other skill, or I need, by saying, okay, what have I
Hmm.
already got that I can use? What do I already know I'm good at? And those are questions that I think a lot of people feel uncomfortable asking because we're conditioned to play those things down,
Yeah,
right?
right.
So,
Right. So if you want to make a meal, right, you can either say, I've got to find a recipe and then go to the shop and buy all the things and then follow the instructions.
mhm,
Or you can say, I'm going to look in the fridge and I'm going to work out what I can make. And neither of those things are wrong.
mm,
But the more you practice the invention test from MasterChef,
yeah.
in fact, this goes back to the egg mayonnaise factory. Terrible end to a podcast, but in the egg mayonnaise factory, it was so noisy and so cold that I had to play Ready Steady Cook with myself because I was in there for 10 hours a day. It was horrible. So I used to give myself an imaginary list of ingredients, and I used to think of all the things that I could make with those ingredients.
Amazing.
And I also worked in a job where I was often given a random group of children to run an art workshop with and be told, like, teach them something about photosynthesis. And I don't know about photosynthesis, but there was a big art cupboard that I could go and be like, what resources have I got? and what can I make out of this?
Yeah.
What is the 30 of?
Yeah.
And I think it's just that, isn't it? It's like practicing using what you have
Yeah.
to do what you want to do.
Yeah.
Maybe
I love
that's the
that.
strap line.
I love that. I love that. Yeah. And yeah, beautiful. Amazing. Right. I've got 100 other things I could talk to you about, Carrie, but we're going to have to wrap it up, sadly. Thank you so much for your time, energy, and wisdom. And thank you so much for the book, which is
Oh,
for creating it and putting it out into the world, because I think it's really important that your work can reach as wide an audience as possible. But yeah, thank you for today.
yeah, it's been lovely. Nice chat.
That was so good. Thank you.
Hey,
So good. Oh, I could
lovely.
talk to you forever. I'm glad we came back